For 11 months, Mexican and American forces played a deadly cat and mouse on the much-disputed Texas border. B.Y.R.L. Healy. When Texas entered the Union in 1845, after 9 uneasy years as an independent republic, the mutual grievances between Mexico and the United States threatened to erupt into open hostilities. Regarding the annexation as an act of territorial aggression, Mexico abruptly terminated diplomatic relations with its northern neighbor. In Washington, its ambassador denounced the annexation for despoiling a friendly nation like Mexico of a considerable portion of her territory. The American response to the parlous state of affairs was to deploy armed forces to the border, allegedly to protect Texas from armed invasion. In reality, the United States was playing a deadly serious game of cat and mouse with Mexico. The build-up for war. At the time of the Mexican protest, soldiers of the Army's 1st Military Department were stationed at Fort Jesup on the western border of Louisiana. On May 28, 1845, their commander, Brevet Brig General Zachary Taylor, a rough, disheveled old Indian fighter, was ordered by the War Department to defend and protect Texas from foreign invasion and Indian incursions. Accordingly, in compliance with President James K. Polk's policy of protecting Texas and countering Mexican belligerents, Taylor selected Corpus Christi, a Texas settlement on the southern bank of the Nueces River, as his base camp in the newly acquired territory. Despite the war fervor in Mexico and the deployment of American troops in Texas, the Polk administration continued its diplomatic efforts. In order to settle the border dispute, the United States was willing to assume all Mexican debts to American citizens in return for the Rio Grande River being accepted as the common boundary line between the two nations. The government of General José Joaquín Herrera, however, refused even to receive an American emissary, fearing that such a reception would be construed as the establishment of congenial relations with the United States. Herrera was sensitive to critics like General Mariano Paredes, who slammed the government for admitting the American representative into the country to arrange for the loss of the integrity of the Republic. Imagine a time not so long ago when the very ground beneath your feet, or at least the ground just a little further south, was a tinderbox ready to ignite into a blaze that would forever reshape a continent. A time when a simple line on a map became the most dangerous, most contested stretch of land in the world. For nearly a year, two proud nations, Mexico and the United States, engaged in a deadly, high-stakes game of cat and mouse, their eyes fixed on a shimmering, uncertain future. We're about to journey back to that precarious moment to uncover the hidden tensions, the missed opportunities, and the explosive decisions that led to the Mexican-American War. And what you're about to hear might just surprise you, revealing a story far more complex and perhaps more tragic than you ever imagined. Our story begins in 1845, a pivotal year that echoed with the fervent spirit of American expansion, what many called manifest destiny. Texas, after 9 tumultuous years as an independent republic, a daring, audacious experiment in self-governance, finally took the monumental step of joining the United States. Now, for us today, this might seem like a straightforward historical footnote. But back then, this act of annexation sent shockwaves far beyond its new borders. To Mexico, this wasn't just a political maneuver. It was an act of outright aggression. An invasion, even. Imagine a neighbor who you've had a long and complicated relationship with, suddenly claiming a significant portion of your backyard as their own, simply because a former tenant decided to move in with them. That's how Mexico saw it. Their ambassador in Washington, a man undoubtedly seething with indignation, didn't mince words. He publicly denounced the annexation as despoiling a friendly nation like Mexico of a considerable portion of her territory. strong words indeed, and not without merit from their perspective. This wasn't merely a war of words, though. The air was thick with mutual grievances, a toxic brew of resentment and suspicion that had been simmering for years. The annexation was simply the spark that threatened to ignite the entire volatile mixture. In Washington, the mood was one of steely resolve, a belief in the righteousness of their expansion. But in Mexico City, it was a boiling cauldron of national pride, a feeling of betrayal, and an unshakable determination not to be pushed around. The American response to this increasingly parlous state of affairs was swift and, some would argue, provocative. They deployed armed forces to the very border of this newly acquired territory. Officially, the reason was noble: to protect Texas from armed invasion. A perfectly reasonable explanation on the surface. But beneath that veneer of protection lay a much deeper, much more audacious strategy. The United States, you see, was playing a deadly serious game of cat and mouse with Mexico. A game where the stakes were nothing less than the future of an entire continent. And the first move had just been made. To truly understand the audacity of this cat and mouse game, we need to look at the immediate aftermath of Mexico's furious protest. At the time, the soldiers of the U.S. Army's 1st Military Department were stationed at Fort Jessup, a seemingly quiet outpost on the western border of Louisiana. These weren't fresh recruits, they were seasoned veterans ready for action. And their commander was a man who would soon become a household name, a figure both revered and reviled depending on which side of the border you stood. His name was Brevet Brigadier General Zachary Taylor. A rough, disheveled old Indian fighter, as he was often described, with a no-nonsense demeanor and a reputation for getting things done. On May 28, 1845, a directive arrived from the War Department that would set him on a collision course with destiny. His orders were clear: to defend and protect Texas from foreign invasion and Indian incursions. A straightforward mission, it seemed, but beneath the surface of these instructions lay the strategic hand of a powerful and ambitious president. President James K. Polk, a man of singular vision and a driving force behind America's westward expansion. Polk's policy was unmistakable. Protect Texas, yes, but also decisively counter Mexican belligerence. He understood that whoever controlled the border would control the narrative, and ultimately the land itself. So, with Polk's policy firmly in mind, General Taylor made his move. He selected Corpus Christi, a burgeoning Texas settlement nestled on the southern bank of the Nueces River, as his primary base camp in this newly acquired, deeply disputed territory. Now, for those unfamiliar with the geography, the Nueces River was a crucial point. For years, Mexico had considered the Nueces as the southern boundary of Texas. But the newly annexed Texas, and by extension the United States, claimed the boundary was further south, all the way to the Rio Grande. Do you see the powder keg forming? Taylor's deployment to Corpus Christi, on the very edge of what Mexico considered its legitimate border, was a deliberate and calculated act. It was a clear signal. The cat, in this dangerous game, had just positioned itself right on the mouse's doorstep, daring it to make a move. And the world held its breath, wondering what would happen next. Despite this overt military posturing, this unmistakable cat-and-mouse game playing out on the dusty Texas plains, President Polk's administration, surprisingly, didn't abandon diplomacy entirely. No. The art of negotiation, however strained, was still on the table. In a shrewd move, designed both to pacify and to press their advantage, the United States extended an offer to Mexico. An offer that, at first glance, might have seemed quite generous. The proposal was this: In exchange for Mexico formally recognizing the Rio Grande River as the undisputed common boundary line between the two nations, the United States was willing to assume all Mexican debts owed to American citizens. Imagine, if you will, being offered a clean slate on your financial obligations, but at the cost of relinquishing a significant portion of your ancestral land. A tempting, yet deeply humiliating, proposition for a proud nation. The Mexican government, led by General José Joaquín Herrera, found itself in an agonizing position. This wasn't just a financial transaction. It was a matter of national honor, territorial integrity, and political survival. Herrera understood the implications. To even receive an American emissary to discuss such terms would be perceived as a capitulation. It would be seen as an admission that Mexico was willing to bargain away its birthright. And he knew, perhaps better than anyone, the powerful forces arrayed against him within his own country. Herrera was particularly sensitive to the scathing criticism coming from figures like General Mariano Paredes. Paredes, a vocal and influential opponent, slammed the government for even contemplating admitting the American representative into the country. His words, no doubt echoing in Herrera's ears, were damning. It would be to arrange for the loss of the integrity of the Republic. This wasn't just political grandstanding. It was a direct challenge to Herrera's authority and to the very soul of Mexico. So, despite the tempting offer of financial relief, Herrera felt he had no choice. He refused even to receive the American emissary. The message was clear. Mexico would not be bought, nor would it be bullied. The line in the sand, or rather, the line between the rivers, was drawn. This rejection of diplomacy, however understandable from Mexico's perspective, sealed the fate of any peaceful resolution. It meant that the cat-and-mouse game had just escalated. The diplomatic doors had slammed shut, leaving only one path open, a path paved with powder and destined for fire. What would happen when two determined forces